This with the last Fallout DLC, Automatron, which was a little bit more mechanic-based, but Far Harbor is a lot more narrative-based. I'm gonna say this right at the top, I found my time in Far Harbor to be a lot more satisfying than Automatron. Yes, there's some really cool stuff in Automatron, like the robot builder. I mean, to be fair, that robot builder. Oh, that robot builder. But I'm a narrative fool. That's basically why I play video games. I love good narrative. And I think that gaming provides the potential for the best narrative. In my opinion, Far Harbor brings you all of the more gray morality and nuanced decisions that we didn't get in the main game. At least as much as maybe a lot of us wanted. The DLC's events kick off when you and Nick Valentine, yes, this is Nick Valentine stuff, so you have to have met Nick Valentine. Anyway, when you and him take on the case of Kasumi Nanako, who's a young woman that, for various reasons, one incredibly specific and plot-centric, even though it's early in the Far Harbor plot, I won't spoil, has run off to a place called Far Harbor. Doi. Now, Far Harbor as a place, I'm going to talk about a little bit first because that kind of gives you a little bit more setup for what's going on in the game. Now, let me say this right off. Far Harbor is incredibly different as a location to the entire rest of Fallout 4, and that is so freaking refreshing. I love what Far Harbor looks like. It still looks a lot like Fallout, but it also brings in a bit of a weird sort of Dishonored vibe to it with the fog and the sort of industrial fisherman aesthetic. Now, the fog actually has a specific purpose. It's radioactive for one, because it's Fallout. What isn't radioactive that looks cool? But the citizens of Far Harbor use these machines called fog condensers, which basically give them fresh air. There's a conflict brewing because the fog condensers are kind of being overtook, and the fog has been spreading on the island, and there are various circumstances relating to that I probably shouldn't get too far into, but there is a sort of radiation or fog worshipping faction called the Children of Adam that may or may not have something to do with that. The main part of the plot takes place in Acadia, though, which is essentially a synth refuge, which is something that I have to say feels just about right. There's a slight cold institute feel to it, but at the same time there's kind of a decay to it and a dissonance about it that feels like what you would expect beings that escaped from such a place to sort of create as a place to exist. To me, it just seems like Far Harbor was very well planned out, because there's so much in Far Harbor that seems as though they didn't just come up with it and then put it into a game. They came up with it, they thought about its impact, and tried to figure out other ways that it would impact the world beyond the immediate one. And I know that that's kind of what Fallout does. Believe me, I do think that that is present in the main game, but I think Far Harbor does it just a little bit better. And it may just be the environment, it may be that it's so radically different from the rest of the game, I don't know, but I feel quite a bit more engrossed in Far Harbor. And it's not like I wasn't engrossed in Fallout 4 to begin with. If I have one gripe I can talk to you about, it's not necessarily a full-blown gripe, because I do actually kind of enjoy my gripes, so bear with me while I explain it, okay? There's essentially a puzzle minigame in this game to retrieve the memories of a very old synth. In fact, a contemporary of Nick Valentine's. You're not like restoring all of his memories or anything, it's actually very specific. I'm not going to get into it because I will ruin this story for you if I do, but there's a section of this game that is starkly different from the rest of the game, and that's these puzzles. Now, you're not really required to do all of them or anything like that, but the more you get done, the more you learn, because the more memories you've retrieved. And that's kind of trying to simplify it as much as I can, as not to explain the actual narrative part of it. The puzzles themselves kind of remind me of Portal in a way, albeit not with a portal gun, but they have elements of that. There's also some elements of Minecraft in there. In order to finish all of these, though, you will end up spending an inordinate amount of time. And I'm gonna say this, I didn't realize for quite a while that I didn't have to keep going. And when you're in that kind of a situation, it's just a little bit annoying, but I decided to keep going anyway, because I had gotten a little bit addicted. If it were a completely different game, where I wasn't interested in a narrative that had very little to do with the type of gameplay I was experiencing, I probably would have enjoyed this a lot more. Not to say I didn't enjoy it, because I did. I thought it was refreshing for a while, but it can go on and on and on and on if you let it. But that's pretty much the one stumble Bethesda made with this whole DLC, in my opinion. And it's more of a pacing stumble than an actual gameplay stumble. Between the locale, all the various huge new enemies that are cool as shit, frankly, and especially the incredibly well done narrative of Far Harbor, it's really hard for me to say that this isn't worth your money. This is worth your money. If you like Fallout 4, if you enjoy the type of storytelling in Fallout as a whole, but are clamoring a little bit more for that more ambiguous style of storytelling and world, Far Harbor is literally the best place for you. And also, like I said, it kind of resembles Dishonored in a way, and I found myself getting excited for Dishonored 2, which is, by the way, another Bethesda property. I'm gonna go ahead and say this, and I don't know if it's true, but I want to know if there was some kind of overlap between the Far Harbor people and the Dishonored people. Because I was getting some serious Dishonored vibes from this DLC, and I loved it. And here's something about the story that endeared me just a little bit more to it than the actual main story. It felt a lot more like a rabbit hole that I was going down and learning new things as I went. Whereas the main story, though it is good and I enjoy it, felt maybe a little bit more point A to point B than Far Harbor.
As for weapons and armor, additions were pretty minor. There are a few good parts that you can add to your existing weapons, but I would say there's nothing ground-shaking as far as that goes. This DLC is definitely focused on story, narrative, lore, and location.
In that respect,